Welcome to episode 103 of the Mountain Mantras, Wellness and Life Lessons podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kathryn Gaillet. Learn more about my work at makeeverythingfun.com. My guest today is Finnian Kelly. Finnian is a 36-year-old business mystic and the creator of Intentionality.com. Finnian built and exited two multi-million-dollar companies in the financial services industry. He now speaks, mentors, teaches, and travels to share and expand his wisdom. Today's interview yields 9 powerful mantras that you can use to create more intentionality in your own life, including more intentional relationships, leadership, and love. Enjoy the interview. Welcome to the show, Finnian.
Thanks so much, Kathryn. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
I know. And it's like we have been talking already for almost 20 minutes because we're like, oh my gosh, we have this in common and there's this and there's that. But I'll just bring listeners into this conversation by saying that we are actually talking from 2 different mountain towns. So I'm always or typically beaming in from Sun Valley, Idaho, and Finnian is beaming in on his last day. So this is kind of this fun thing that we were able to squeeze in before he takes off on this world tour, but he's beaming in from Austin. So from Aspen. So how is Aspen? Has the snow melted? Like, when did the mountain close?
So the main mountain of Aspen closed on the weekend. Snowmass is still finishing this weekend. And it's funny, last night we actually got a beautiful snow dump. So my last day I'm going to be leaving and it looks more snowy than it was a lot of the winter. It was quite summery all winter, but it's Aspen's amazing. It's one of the most unique towns in the world. I describe it as the place that packs the punch of a New York or an LA in a small little mountain town. And it's got the fittest people, it's got the richest people, it's got the people who just love mountain life. It has it all, which is wonderful.
I love it. I have a good friend who was on Wall Street decades ago. And she's like, I'm leaving Wall Street. And she and her partner went and just traveled the whole country, went to every small town, big town, medium town. And guess where they ended up? In Aspen.
Aspen.
Yeah. And people say the same thing about Sun Valley. So how often do you leave and then come back? Because there is something about a mountain town where it's good to kind of get a change of perspective. And I think this change of perspective will come up later in the conversation, which is why I'm asking it.
Mm-hmm. So when I first moved over to America 5 years ago, I moved to Beaver Creek, which is down the road, about an hour and a half away. And I did just nearly 3 years there. And I spent a lot of time there, but I did travel in between. And then now I'm finding that I love living in 2 locations. So I would love to do winters in Aspen, come back and spend a little bit of time in summer, but then travel in between. And that beach location, I am Australian. We like our beaches. And I realize even though I'm like diehard mountain man, I just sometimes need that refreshing ability to hop in the water. And it's very grounding in the water as well. So I love that element.
Oh, now I'm getting jealous. Yeah. I mean, it's one of these things. It's like, we haven't decided to make Sun Valley a part-time place for us yet, but I love that idea. So you're not necessarily, you're just going to places and like renting and things like that, as opposed to having to complicate your life by having multiple locations that you have to take care of.
Yeah, that seems a little bit too hard for me. I like simple lives. Even like I live a bit of a nomadic lifestyle now. And sometimes I'm like, oh, all this gear. That's the hardest thing about being a nomad when you're actually like love adventures. So you've got to have your mountain bike, your road bike, your 7 sets of different skis for all the different type of mountaineering you do. Then I got into rivers last year. I'd been trying to avoid the river for a long time, but now I'm hooked on rafting and stand-up paddleboarding. So you end up having no possessions, but a lot of possessions. And that's one of my biggest challenges is how do I like navigate that? Because I need them at different times at different places.
I love that.
First world problems, really first world problems.
First world problems, yeah. Have you ever had your human design done? You know how they tell you if you're a mountain person or a shores person? Which one are you? Or sometimes
so human design, isn't that like manifestor generator? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm a manifestor generator. That's what I'm there.
MG. Yep. I'm one of those too. It's so funny. You can actually, it'll also tell you kind of what location. And it's really funny because my husband is a mountain location. That's like where his juju is. And then I'm a shores. So
Wow.
maybe you're inspiring me a little bit that we need to kind of get out and I need to get my feet in the water. But we're okay. So the change in perspective, I think that's going to come back in because you are so well known for intentionality. And as we were talking about in the pre-interview chat, there's this important role I hope we can delve into, which is to kind of bridge what's going on with, let's just say, that sort of 20-ish old generation, the ones that are in college, many that have decided to not go to college right now or to take a gap year because it's so hard to be in college during the pandemic. It's a completely different experience. Many are lost,
Mm-hmm.
disillusioned. They don't feel like they have a purpose. It's a serious issue. And then you have all the baby boomers and stuff that are like, they had a completely different set of values. It was much more about money, retirement, houses, that whole thing. And then you have like the millennials, which are you in the
Yeah,
millennial?
I'm a
You're
millennial.
okay.
Yep.
Okay. So I skipped over my generation. I don't even know what I'm called. I guess X. Where we're kind of a bridge too, because if you look at the baby boomers and the millennials, they are truly opposites in terms of what they value, right? You look at the baby boomers and freedom in terms of their list of values might be way at the bottom. Whereas like millennials, like freedom is right at the top. And some of those things that the baby boomers value is at the bottom. So I can say being in the middle, in my perspective, has been confusing and somewhat of a bridge. But we're all older, and what is so exciting is what's going to happen in the planet going forward. So you as a bridge between, let's just say, my generation and that 20-year-old generation, how can we help them today?
So I think the biggest thing is to not put our life experiences or potentially our fears or insecurities onto this younger generation. That's when I see a lot of people struggling with connection. They think that they're doing their best for their child and helping them, but really what they're doing is helping their own insecurities and their own concerns. So like even just the nature of like, well, what are you going to do? Are you going to go to college? Like that's putting a lot of pressure on young people. It makes them feel like they're not where they need to be right now. And they've got to be looking for something in the future, which takes them out of the present moment. And the present moment's where all the magic is. So we need to be very careful with our language. We don't realize, we sometimes think we're supporting like our loved ones, but really we're actually projecting something onto them, which is stopping them from really discover these things themselves. So in a weird way, I am super happy that people are thinking that they can take a year off again. Like that was a big part in Australia and England. It was all about the gap year. It was about going and travel and explore. And 1 year in the grand scheme of things does not make any difference in the life. Like I think most people have got to my age, they've either had multiple careers, divorces, medical things go wrong, business things go wrong. And you look at it and you go, where was the rush? Like things just happen, like things change in our life. We don't need to put these pressure on ourselves because the life that we thought we were going to have, like I've lived a very different life than I thought I had. And if I look back and I was like, well, it didn't really matter if I had taken a year off or 2 years off to go discover myself. Like what's wrong with that? It's funny. I've got this interesting, I work with a lot of YPO and EO, which is like two top entrepreneurial organizations in the world. I'm members of them and I also coach them and facilitate retreats. And I love it because I get this beautiful insight into a lot of these people are older, sort of 50 to 60. They're my peers and I love connecting with them and I love challenging them. So I had this one situation with an entrepreneur and he was talking about one of his issues with his son. His son is a ski guide in one of the best resorts in the world, couldn't be more happy. Like his dad actually admits that he's the happiest you could see your son. Like he's so happy. He doesn't have a materialistic bone in his body. When his father comes and tries to help him out, like, oh, I can go to Costco and buy these things. And he's like, no, I don't have any interest for that. I've got everything I need. And it's such a dilemma because the dad knows that the son is literally living his best life. He's so happy, he's humble, but then he's got these insecurities because his definition of success is, well, you should be getting a job which is earning this amount of money and setting off this path, even though that didn't bring him fulfillment. And it's fascinating watching the dilemma because he knows that his son is actually the happiest, but he still wants something else for him because it's actually his own insecurities and concerns being projected onto him. And luckily, he's such an incredible guy and he's aware of it and he's speaking about it, but it's just fascinating seeing how this happens. So I just think let's just let them be free and support them and trust that they're going to be okay. Like you managed to find your way through life. Why can't they?
I love that. And, I do these mantras throughout the show, and there are so many that you've already highlighted here. I'm just going to have to cover a few of them. So I think it's really important for us to just say it's so hard because I'm a parent myself, but to not put pressure and my own projections on my children, right? Because I have my life, they have theirs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to say that. Be careful with language. I want to go back to that in a second. But I also have to say that this mantra about life does not have to be linear and we don't have to be in a rush. Like that's okay. Let's go to language though. So I have this friend and he talks about how when we speak, we actually cast spells. And that's what spelling is. We're actually casting spells. So when you were talking about being careful with language, and this was in particular with this, how we're speaking to that younger generation, do you have any things that you would say, absolutely do not say this, or this might be a better way to say it? I think language is so key.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So I agree with the spells thing. So when whatever we put out there, we're basically saying that this is what we approve of. So it can even be as simple as things where someone is getting getting really good grades, and you acknowledge them every time they come home with an A and you support them. And effectively, in a weird way, you can be saying that your love is conditional on them giving A's, because that's the time where you beam up and you recognize them and everything, rather than they came back and just said, oh, this was an incredible creative project that I did. So just even little things about what we endorse, even things like also thinking about what we say, what we label about someone. So when we say someone is, oh, this one's the conscientious one, or this one's the hard worker, or this one's the troublemaker. What are you actually doing? You're labeling that person and you're positioning them to be that person. So if you start thinking that you're the troublemaker, well, you want to start naturally living up to what you expect. So you start causing more trouble. If you're the messy one, and you just start being more messy, or if you're the conscientious one, you get so focused on doing that you can't actually just be free and share your feelings. So whenever we label someone, that is a spell. We're limiting that person. Instead, we just need to be curious and just be open and see, oh, that's wonderful, and support whatever endeavor they're doing, because it's their path. That's the most important thing. It's not your path. The whole thing about intentionality, we have a little catchphrase. It's find your path, get on your path, and stay on your path. And the most important thing is that you have your path. Yes, we have a philosophy which will guide you and give you some signposts on how to get it, but it's not my path that I'm helping you find. This is all your path. And that's the beauty of life. And it's not linear. Sometimes your path, you might think you're behind against someone else, but then they're about to do a big loop, and then you're effectively ahead of them, but you're comparing against one variable. You're not comparing about all the variables in life. And just go on that incredible journey. And that's the wonder of life, is that you just don't really know where you're going to go.
And I think it's so important what you said about language, is that even sometimes the positive language can backfire like that. I wasn't expecting that, but it makes perfect sense, because if you're always saying wow, that's so great, we're so proud of you for getting A's, or whatever it is, you're just continuously, it's basically like taking away unconditional love. It's making it conditional, which is not what a child needs.
You're exactly right. And that's one of the confronting things, because a lot of the parents think, and it's not just parents, it's loved ones, it's friends, it's grandparents, it's a whole group of people. They go, but I'm doing it for them. This is such a great thing. See, I'm being supportive. And I'm like, yeah, but you're not aware of what is actually being transposed onto that person, what imprint you're having to them, and how they're reacting to that. They now don't feel like they can actually have anger. That's a big one. Families don't feel like they can have anger, or they can't share their feelings or sadness, whatever it is. And then that just creates a lot of suppressed negative energy, which comes into them, which at some point wants to come out and release. And that's effectively what midlife crises are, when there's enough suppressed negative energy in our body, which then needs to just suddenly come out and people are like, I don't know what to do with this. And that's an important practice, which I really just want to, if we could teach one thing in school is how to feel. Like that would be the most important thing. And feeling is actually like there's two parts. There's emotions and feelings. Emotions are in us subconsciously and consciously. Like there are emotions that you don't even know are in you. I'm right now, I'm going through a transition in my life and I'm opening up the doorway to my subconscious and emotions are coming out. And I'm like, what are these? I don't know what they are. They've been there the whole time. What effect are they having in my life? So then the feelings are conscious. You have emotions arising up and now you're choosing to actually feel that element. And that's the important part in life. The more we can just allow those emotions to come up out of us, the easier life is, the more in love with life will be, the more in love with ourselves will be. And if we can just teach a young person to do that, it's going to be exponential, the outcomes that they can have in their life, because it's these suppressed negative emotions, which is trauma, which makes us go out and do crazy self-sabotaging behaviors. It's what some of the leaders, you look at some of the leaders in our life right now, you're like, yep, they've just got a lot of suppressed negative energy that they need to release out in the world. And they're doing it through just not very nice, kind things.
And I think there's some important mantras there that I want to highlight is that we need to teach at school about emotions. It's just energy in motion, right? There's motion right there in the word, and that's all about how we don't want to suppress emotions. I remember going to a biodynamic breathwork retreat, and it was 8 days, and holy cow, like
wow.
Somebody needed to put a lot of Palo Santo and clear out that space, because so much emotions were released in that very, very small room with this group of people that I was with. And it was a beautiful situation, to see that everyone was so open in doing that. But it was like taking out the garbage, right? And you know what I'm saying? Like there was so much garbage, and what biodynamic breath work does is it incorporates like a holotropic breath work with body work. And there's 7 bands. This is all based on the philosophy of this modality, is that we actually hold tension in 7 key bands, starting with ocular, to the jaw, thoracic spine, and all the way down to the pelvis. And so each day we actually released tension, suppressed emotions out of those areas. And woo, was it crazy. The reason why I'm bringing this up is that at the end of the 8 days, the facilitator, who's the founder of this modality, said, okay, now we got all that garbage out. Just because we got all that garbage out doesn't mean that you can now stockpile all of your stuff going forward and never take it out again. And if you think about that in your house, it's like, what would happen if the garbage guys stopped coming, or you stopped putting it out there week after week after week after week, year, decade after decade? It starts to fill up. So it's not only this understanding of getting started at the process of taking out the garbage, but it's also committing to doing that going forward. So when you're working with anyone, but young people in particular, how do you convince them to do something that is hard like that, which is to take out that garbage?
So I love the garbage analogy, because often the garbage isn't even yours. That's the amazing thing. We are energetic fields. We have a field around us, and we can protect us if we're intentional about what energy comes in. But if we're not, we're an open field. And a lot of times it's other people's energy that comes into you. You didn't realize it gets stored. And then you're struggling, and you're confronted with life, and you're feeling a little bit off. And it's not even your garbage. It's your mums, it's your dads, it's your friends. And that's why we need to be constantly cleansing and releasing it so it can get up out of us. And I am shocked every time, because I'm a breathwork facilitator, and sometimes it terrifies me, the energy that starts flying up out of the room, because I'm like, wow, they've never really felt properly before. And this is something which I always say with any of this work, and I don't think it's spoken about enough, is that energy, when you're in a group setting, that energy comes up out of you, and often it wants to look to go to somewhere else. So you need to be very intentional at the end of your practice of putting up a closing field, basically closing the door to the subconscious intentionally. You can just do it simply by connecting to the sun, the masculine energy of the sun, bringing down that light, raising your frequency, connecting to the earth below, grounding to Mother Nature's beautiful feminine energy, and just setting the intention of releasing any negative energy, low vibration back down. And then just protecting your aura around you. And that will protect you from anything. You can do this exercise and going down the most dangerous streets in places, and people won't even notice you if you have this nice protective field. It's powerful. Really great if you know your family has some low vibrational frequencies, some tension when you go back for holiday season. Just put up one of these shields. So that's something I just wanted to share. Now with younger people, you love that?
I love it. Can I just say, like, I am so glad that you're on this planet, right? Because, and you're here at the right time, because, there are, older generations, the Judith Orloffs of the world that wrote all about energy vampires and empaths and narcissists and all that kind of stuff. But I'm not quite sure that her teachings, philosophies, style is necessarily going to reach this group. So I'm so glad that you're on that. And I love her and I honor her work. And we are standing on the shoulders of giants. But it's this beauty in the way that you're packaging it and the messenger that's so important to this next generation, which is really this next generation is going to have to save the world. So it's an important generation to nurture.
They're great.
Right, I'm going to let you go on. Sorry about that. I just had to say how much I love it.
Thank you. And I think that's the important thing is that most great things in life are actually quite simple. We just love to complicate it. The human, the ego, the left side thinking brain, analytical brain, which connects to the ego, loves to complicate it with language. But we can just simplify it. And I always just point things out by getting people to knowing rather than just using language. So for example, if we look at young kids, what do they do all the time? They're shaking their hands, they're bouncing, because they intuitively know that there's energy that needs to be released. Like young children just know to do that. They're innate. We're born with everything we need to know. Then what do? We tell them, sit down, stop bouncing, stop wriggling. Like it's all this conditioning in teaching and our parents to make people feel still. So effectively, the releasing of energy starts dropping to the point where it just starts building inside of them. So we've trained this out of young children. So now, as we're older, we need to start bringing back some of that childlike wonder, some of that childlike wisdom into our lives and just follow them, like mimic what children do. Wake up in the morning, because a lot of energy, we've connected to the subconscious in the nighttime, a lot of energy swirling around. Don't just get up and bring that and put it onto your partner or go into your work life. Get up and shake. Like the first thing I do in the morning is just have a little bounce, like just a simple, I just sort of bounce around and I release some energy. Meditating is a great way you can get connected to your emotions, be aware of your emotions. Like there's a beautiful process called emotional clearing, which is founded by John Ruskin, and I'm an emotional clearing facilitator. And it's just a beautiful process where you become aware of your emotions. You then accept them. So you don't judge them, don't blame them, no negative or positive connection to them. It's just, I feel anger, I feel sadness. Then we go on to direct experience them. So we drop into our body and we identify where they are, what's happening to them. And we start like letting the emotional charge drop off. We start releasing them. And then we go to the final step, which is going to the witness. We hand it over to our high gods or our angels, whatever it is, our higher self, and we just release it and we go, we don't need that anymore, and we release it out. If we did that every time we were triggered, we would be a calm, happy, joyful being. If leaders did this in the world, we wouldn't be having wars because we would be like, what's the need? So this process of learning how to become connected to your feelings and releasing them is wonderful. And regular practices, just simply like, you can do this. Like I have a list of different ways to do it because some people can't connect with meditation. They're too left brain and it's too hard for them. But for those people, I say, don't try to meditate, just sit. Even if it's just sitting and you actually just listen to your thoughts the whole time, that's okay. Go for a walk in nature, lie down. What do kids do? They lie down on grass because they know we're meant to be connected. We're energy. where there's an electromagnetic force in the world, and we are meant to be part of Earth. We're not meant to be separate. We're one being, but we've separated ourselves through rubber shoes, through being in complete fortresses in our homes. We don't go out in nature. We're meant to go out there and release. We have earthing. Like when you think about electric circuits, there's always an earthing circuit to release energy down to the earth. We have not got the earthing circuit anymore. So we're just storing all this energy, and this is the whole rise of stress and anxiety. It's just because we don't have an earthing circuit. So we need to start thinking, well, I need an earthing circuit. So how do I do that? Go outside every day and stand in the dirt for 10 minutes. Go lie down in the grass and look up at the tree. If you have high anxiety or stressed, if you do that, there'll be moments, feels like you get shorted. It's like something goes and you're zapped of all your energy. You sort of and then you come to and you're like, wow, I feel clear and feel released. It's not hard work. Go walk in a beach, hop in an ocean. We naturally know these things are great for us. So we need to do more of that. Breathing is an incredible tool. There's so many different ways. Sitting in the sun and just allowing us to get a big dose of serotonin, we're going to feel better. It's not hard work. It's actually simple. It's going back to what we know innately is good for us.
I love that. And I'm a nature gal and all of that stuff. And I'll recap some of those tools in the show notes because I want to go on with this conversation. There's so many juicy things in there. And I will say I was just at a sort of a dance party recently, but it was during the day, and I had my shoes off, and truly the more and more dirty that my feet became, the more happier I was.
Yes. It's so true.
But okay, there's so much to talk about. So spirituality, I know that word, it almost carries a charge, and it's not necessarily a good one for the younger generation. And of course, like, our time is limited. I want to also talk about the, bridging the old school generation as well. But this last piece on the younger generation, how do we gently, positively introduce some of these concepts? Because what you're talking about to a certain extent is about spirituality, but for some reason, in my experience, when spirituality comes up with this age group, it's sort of like, not for me.
Such a wonderful question. I'm glad you brought it up. So there is a connotation which comes with spirituality. A lot of it is connected to religion. And when I think about religion, I think religion is part of spirituality. Spirituality is above. Religion is here. And it's been created in a human construct to guide people through a path. But there's often a lot of limitations. There's a lot of human egoic beliefs that come through there, and it's limiting. And I think that's why the young generation have seen what has happened in religion in a lot of different areas and how it's been abused. And there's a lot of beautiful parts. Like if you look at all religions, they have the same values frames, same set of values. It's beautiful. It comes from the same origin, but as over time, humans corrupt it, which is unfortunate. So the younger generation are seeing this and they don't want to be part of it. And unfortunately, spirituality is getting connected to that world. When I describe spirituality, it's purely getting to know yourself. That's how I like to think of spirituality. It's getting to know yourself and experiencing the wonder of this life and realizing that there's more to life than what we see. So that is your journey. Spirituality, it's not a dogma. It's not having to follow any particular beliefs or constructs. It's purely your experience. And that's something which I love about Buddhism, is that if you look at everything that Buddha said, the final thing he said is that don't take my word for it. It's about have your own experience. Your experience trumps anything that I've said. And that's something incredibly powerful. He's the most wise spiritual leader, one of the most spiritual leaders we've ever had in our world. And he even said, take your experience over mine, because that is the spiritual path. Now that's liberating for young people. If we can start getting them to see this, that it's just an exploration of yourself and that there's more than what you're seeing and there's possibility and that you're an infinite, you're an abundant divine being. If you give them just a little touch of that, wow, they're going to be energized by life. They're going to be excited by life. And that's what, if we could get breath work in schools and get people to have this feeling, because that's what breath work does. It forces you to get a touch of what's in you. It bypasses the mind, the rational brain that we've trained so well in the modern day world, where it's become super powered, we blast it through and we get people to have a connection of what's really inside them, that they all have a bit of divine, and everyone changes. I've taken senior entrepreneurs who are engineers, who are math people, who are so strict in their views, religious people who couldn't even believe that there was actually something there, who dropped in, they had this experience and they were changed forever because they were like, I had no idea I had this in me. I've always thought it was out there. I've been looking, but it's been in here the whole time. Imagine if we showed that to young adults or teenagers, how liberating that would be, and how that whole idea of like suicide, they would never do that again because they would be like, wow, I don't need to worry about anything. I've got this incredible power in here. And that's something which I just really recommend young people and parents, just give them a touch. And I'm seeing there's a beautiful moment in life right now where there's parents who are really awakening, like they're awakened parents, and they're treating children as not different. They're treating as equals, but they're guiding them and they're bringing them on the journey. Like I've done breathwork journeys for parents and their children, and it's just, I'm in awe. Like I'm just so in love with them, and you see the connection, and I just go, this is exciting. And that's why I'm excited about this world and this generation, because there are beautiful awakened parents like yourself who are doing really cool things.
Oh, well, thank you. We're all, I always say that parents are just doing the very best that they can with the resources that they have at that moment. But I have to underline that mantra of introducing spirituality purely as a way of getting to know yourself better. Like that will open the door for so many people just by highlighting that. And I wanted to ask on this young person's topic, do you have retreats specifically for that age group?
So I haven't gone into that level yet. I'm trying to decide if that's something I want to do. I'm definitely doing speaking and I'm creating content for them, but I haven't run specific retreats just for that age group yet. But maybe this might be the challenge that I need to actually do it.
You never know what's going to happen out of a podcast interview, right? Yeah. I've heard a lot of programs be created that way. Okay, so let's switch gears briefly and kind of go the other way in terms of looking towards the older generation and how they can transform fast enough, meaning like they have to transform or just be not really left behind, but just miss out on all this beauty and connection and nature and spirituality. And, so how can we bring them along for the ride?
Oh, that's a challenging question. You've thrown me there. Experiences. I think that's one of the wonders of Burning Man, when people go, and it's funny. Like people think it's a young crowd at Burning Man. I actually think it's an older crowd. It's a crowd who are coming and they're like, we've brought up our kids. We've achieved everything we thought we wanted to achieve. And I'm still not there. I'm not fulfilled. And they come and it's like a refresh and they get to see the energy of life. And I think that's one of the wonders is like when the camps they've got multiple generations and they all learn from each other. The wiser, more older people look at the youthfulness and the energy and the great new ideas and how they're approaching new life and they're open to them. And then the younger people can see that, you don't actually have to get old. Like old is a mindset. Like you can be young, even though you've got years on this earth. And I think that's a really important part. So the more cross-generational work, the better. I see that as a huge opportunity in this world right now, is because for the first time, the old generation aren't old. They're young. Like they're really, really young. Like it used to be that life expectancy was 63. So we still see that 50 to 60-year-olds are old, but we're living off an old area. Like they're halfway through their life. They're youthful. They've got a fresh lease on life. I mean, if we can do that multi-generational connection, we're going to learn so much from each other, and we're going to be able to come together and see, especially if we come in with open views and release some of our beliefs, because maybe they weren't our beliefs, they were someone else's. We might be able to connect in this world. And that's something where whenever I hear people like complaining about another generation, I'm just like, it's the wrong way. You're bringing hate into this. Like hate never works. Like it's always got to be love. And how can we bring us together and realize that we're all the same? We just had different amount of years on this planet. And to tell you the truth, there's some young ones who've had a lot more years on the planet than the older ones because they're old souls. Like we see that. So anything to connect them, to show them experiences, and to help them see that they're operating from a set of beliefs which may be limiting and may not really be their beliefs. We can give them permission to open up and explore life. Then that's really what we need. And that's for anyone. That's for anyone.
I love that idea of bringing curiosity to this intergenerational conversation, because I have had so much fun working with the younger generation. And actually, I also work with like that, 50 plus group, but a lot of the people that I work with believe that the life expectancy in their lifetime will be 150. So it's like a
Yep.
third of their way through their lives. So there's just so much going on right now. And with that, and that previous question about not leaving people behind, I noticed that you attended Singularity University,
Yeah.
and there's this whole thing with what is it, Moore's law, and like how change is going to increase, exponentially. Like, how can we, from an intergenerational perspective, from a intentional perspective, dare say spiritual and love driven perspective, get ready for this exponential growth that I think we all know that we're going into?
Yeah, it goes back to really getting to know yourself. Like we need to, so that we're upgrading the world around us. Technology is going exponentially. Our systems are changing. Everything's changing, which means that we also need to evolve. We can't be operating from the same way. We need to be evolving. We need to be more free. We need to be more fluid. We need to be more open, and be in a place where we're not rigid. Like it's one of the like behaviors of intentionality is to be disciplined but not rigid. Rigidness doesn't work. It doesn't enable us to float, but discipline enables us to actually like make sure we're doing the work to be able to adjust. So I think that discipline, not rigid, is super important as well. And getting into the mindset that the old way of like thinking that we needed to be the one who knows how to like the formulas and everything like that. We don't need to know that anymore. We just need to be the creative ones to see how it all works together. And that's where like this is one of the challenges when you're talking about parenting. Parents still are operating from that way that they think, a lot of them, this is a generalization, that being a doctor, an accountant, lawyer, they're good professions. But those professions, they're going to be just completely like run by robots. We need to be having creative problem solvers. Like that's what I love what's now starting to come out of a lot of Silicon Valley. They're saying like the number one thing that people should be learning is creative problem solving and thinking about the human language, using written language to impact people. That's the arts are going to have a new rising again, which I'm really excited about, because we need that right side feeling brain, that right side feeling body to have a resurgence, because we've gone too far on the left. And it's not about going too far on the right. It's about being integrated together. That's the work, is to have left and right brain and integrated. But we are left brain dominated in the world right now. And logic doesn't always work.
It's interesting. I love that you just said that the arts are going to have more prominence and respect, because, I think there's so many people you can read. Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. My
Yeah.
mom was an artist. I mean, there's so many struggling artists, right? And you try to figure out, do you put pressure on that art to make a living, or do you figure out a way to make a living? So it's so interesting that you're saying that. And when I had a conversation with another friend of mine that attended Singularity, he was really, you could have walked away from that conversation either terrified or inspired. And when I say terrified, it was truly about like, Kathryn, in 10 years, these positions aren't going to exist anymore. These tasks aren't going to exist, these jobs, these skills. It was, really all about AI and, nano bots and like all kinds of stuff. It was really, but to me, it was really cool, because you have to have that abundant mentality of saying, okay, well, there's always still going to be a role for the right brain, for connection, for emotion, for love, right? I
There
mean,
is.
there is always a place. And for those people that are, nervous about that kind of stuff, there's a great book. I think it's by Peter Diamandis himself, Abundance.
Yeah, it
It's this,
is.
yeah. So will you talk just for a moment about that, that shift into because I've heard you talk about this and I talk about this as well, to move from fear into love. And I
Mm,
think that that applies to this futuristic view, instead of being afraid of it, but to move into love and to realize that actually love is going to be a skill that 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 humans need more than ever.
it is. So number one, so the 7 principles of intentionality, and number one is experience peace and joy by learning to choose love over fear. So it just summarizes exactly what you said. And the key element is that learning, because we have to learn how to choose love over fear, because we've been taught that fear is a driver for us, and it works. It's the whole, as soon as we come out, it's like, stop doing that, don't do that. It's like we're just being disciplined rather than just going, all right, curious, explore that area. So we have to learn how to choose love, and love is such a more powerful driver than fear. Love conquers fear all the time. It's an abundant feeling. Fear is a limited feeling. It's a low vibrational energy, low and high vibration. We are just vibration in life. And every thought, every feeling is a spectrum on the emotional frequencies, and love is the most powerful. It's why people, suddenly a mother can lift a car up over their baby, because love is powerful. They have such love. It's not fearful that the baby's going to die. It's love of that baby which lifts it up. The person who's in fear is paralyzed. They don't take action. And that happens at a lot of events. You see literally people who could save that person, but they're in so much fear that they're paralyzed. The person with love just goes in, I'll make it happen. So love is where we're at. And with the exponential technologies, actually one of the biggest fears is not that people think it's all about we won't have a job, we won't be able to survive. The actual, when you look at it, that's from a scarcity mindset that the world's not going to provide, there isn't going to be enough. If you actually look at where the technology is going, it may be that we have everything we need, like everything's provided for us. We actually don't need to work. Now that's the scary thing, because that means you're going to have a lot of time with yourself. And if you haven't learned to love yourself and you suddenly have all this time, it's super confronting. It's why people don't like to have breaks, because then they have to actually get to know themselves and really get connected. So the biggest thing that we can do to prepare for that time is 2 things. One, learn creative skill sets, that creative problem solving, because that is always going to be required. There's always going to be problems in Earth. Like there's just nature. Humans create problems. So if you know how to think and how to solve problems and connect and pull people together, you're always going to be in need. And then secondly, start learning how to be with yourself, how to love your own presence. Instead of when you're sitting in a bus stop thinking about, I've got to grab my phone and check what's going on. How about you just sit there and just take note of what's happening for yourself? I don't think many people spend a moment each day with themselves. Not a moment. That's challenging to think of. What do you mean I don't spend any time with myself? I'm with myself all the time. No, you're not. You're with other things. You're out there. You're external. You're not with yourself. Even in isolation, people weren't with themselves. They'll distract themselves with Netflix. Be with yourself, because you might learn something about yourself, and eventually you'll realize that you're a divine, infinite, abundant, powerful love being. And that's pretty amazing.
Okay, Finnian, can you stay just a couple minutes over?
Yes. Yeah, I'm completely fine.
Okay. Because what you just said was so juicy. Oh my gosh. Can I just, and since we're in these mountain towns, can I tell a little story about choosing love over fear?
I'd love that.
Okay. So it's in my book, Mountain Mantras, which I'll send you after the interview, but it's the story about so I have a nonprofit that I run. I founded it over a decade ago, and we teach nutrition education in the school system. And we grew really, really fast. We went into 34 states, and we were teaching programs to kids and to social service agencies, teaching families on food stamps about how to cook with healthy foods on a budget. And I was going for a really, really big grant. It was a high stakes it was high stakes monetarily. It was high stakes socially, because it was just one of these things where it was like, I was in front of a lot of people that I really respected. I was going for the big grant. It was the final presentation, and I was nervous. And I talked to my kids. I said, Mom's nervous about this presentation. I guess I could have said I was fearful. I could have admitted that. And what advice do you have? And I'll tell you, my daughter, she's so cute. She said, "Mom, be prepared. Like really, really know your stuff, right?"
Mhm.
And she's just this amazing, intelligent, buttoned up individual who is very, very prepared. Here's the ski story. So my son, he's younger, and he was way younger at the time. He said, "Oh, Mom, okay, let me think about when I did the pond skim." So Finian,
Awesome.
do you guys have
Yeah,
pond
we do.
skims? Okay,
Yeah.
so he literally went into his story. He said, when I was, at the top of the mountain and I was looking down and all, they announced the next skier. So people listening and viewing, what a pond skim is you ski pretty much straight. You don't turn, you just get as much speed down a mountain as you possibly can on your skis. And at the bottom of the mountain, there's this huge pond. And the goal is to try to get across the pond. Now they have emergency teams and ambulances, and like it's a lot of people get hurt. It's really, really dangerous. It's a little crazy, but it's like an exhilarating thrill. So this was the first time my son had ever done it, and he was up there and he's in his costume and there's calling all the folks, and he was actually getting that sense of like, maybe I shouldn't go. Like this is really, really scary. And Finian, what he did is he connected to his deep, amazing love of the sport. Like he
Mm.
loves to ski and he loves this community. And he looked around at this beautiful day and like all of his friends and everybody was in costume. And he was just like, I have been waiting and looking forward to this day for so long. And zoom, he went down the mountain like super fast. And mom and dad were like, and he went across the pond, so it's one of those things like so that was the story he told me. And I took that and I went in front of that group and I connected to the love of that organization and the work that we do for others. And I knocked it out of the park.
Mm.
So I just wanted to tell that story
Ah,
because it's so true. It's like, okay, love, fear, we can look at the map of consciousness and Dr. David Hawkins' work and all that stuff, but really kind of putting it to the test, like it works every time. And if you're right, Finian, about where we're going with how the world's going to change and how skills are going to change and jobs and what humans do on this planet,
yeah.
you are absolutely right. We have got to learn to be with ourselves. We've got to learn to love ourselves and love each other.
It gives me goosebumps hearing that story. And it's a direct example of that connection of how we can learn from different generations. Traditionally, you might not think, what could a young person tell me about like coming in and giving a keynote or anything? And you might have thinking you wanted a direct, tangible advice related to that, but you allowed it to be open. And he just gave you the most wonderful thing. And you got a visceral response in your body and you knew exactly what to do. And that's the power of like connecting with different generations, but also just coming back to love. It's like whenever you go into fear, you lock up. You're limited. It's like the number one thing when you ski jump, very similar, is like you got to breathe and relax and go, I love this jump. And then you land and you fluid and it just comes natural because something takes over you. That's the flow state. Flow state is getting to a place where you're just connected to love, something bigger than you, and you're not really thinking. Fear is thinking. Love is being.
That is interesting. That I've never heard that before. And we can like totally take each other's stories and use them, right? That is
I
a
will.
good one.
I love that one.
Fear is thinking and love is being. Okay. All right. So how can people get involved in your work? How can we attach to this energy, or not attach, but just connect, to get into the juju, the vibe of all that you're doing for all different generations? Because I know that you not only work with young people and with parenting, with relationships and do keynotes, but also this idea of organizational culture, right? And how can organizations better integrate different generations and, dare we say, move out of fear into love? So how can people find you, connect with you, get involved with you?
So what I'd ask or invite everyone to do is just commit to this life of intentionality. It's one word and it's super powerful. And the great thing about intentionality, it's not some destination in the future. You can from today take one thing that I said, action one thing, whether it's grounding or going out in nature, and you can live a life of intentionality, and then it has a snowball effect. So I've created a beautiful set of resources for your audience. If you go to my website, which is finiankelly.com, and then just do /podcast, it will give you a list of intentionality tools, things that you can apply in your life today or tomorrow, and you'll be on the pathway of intentionality. And through that, then you'll be able to, there's some more videos talking about it, and just make that commitment. And then if you're interested, you can just start looking at the other opportunities I have. But that would be the greatest privilege for me, is just someone goes, I'm now going to live a life with intentionality.
I love that. I'm going to title this episode, Commit to a Life of Intentionality.
I love
that
it.
is such a great one. And, folks, go to that website link. I will put it in the show notes, finniankelly.com/podcast. And there's a bunch of other places that you can find out about his work. But get involved, get on this bandwagon. Don't be afraid. Step into love. And Finnian, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been so much fun.
Thank you. I loved it, Kathryn.